Hello and welcome to CFO Focus Live. I'm Aditi Roy, formerly of CNBC and ABC News, and currently with Aditi Roy Media. I'll be your host for this episode. We have a fun show for you today revolving around sports and cars. We'll hear the stories behind the home runs, the expansion of enterprises, and a game-changing new model for youth sports. We have a stellar lineup of executives we'll be hearing from today. Terezka Zabka is general counsel with the San Diego Padres. Prior to the Padres, Terezka spent several years working in tech at Viasat. Mike Bufano is president and CFO at League One Volleyball. Prior to League One, Mike was the CFO at Allbirds and Panera Bread. He calls himself a team builder and culture champion. And Cristian Torres is executive counsel at Van Tile Companies, a diversified company which operates a dozen dealerships across the West and South. Prior to his role, Cristian has worked at Carvana, Volkswagen, and Nissan. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to dive deeper into your backgrounds in just a minute, but first, I want each of you to tell us a little bit about your company. Give us a snapshot, any financials you're able to share publicly, and how many employees you have, where you are geographically. Terezka, let's start with you.
Thank you for having me. So as the San Diego Padres, most people know us as a baseball team, but the organization is quite large. We have about 1,700 employees. Of that, 500 are full-time, and they're across the country, including down in the DR. Revenue, about $400 million last year.
And a little bit about your owners.
So it's owned by the majority family, as most baseball teams are. There's a slight diversification when it comes to sort of public companies or private equities owning it, but most clubs are owned sort of by small families, single owners.
And this family has owned your team for a while now.
They have since 2012, but they're definitely a baseball family with deep roots.
Awesome. Mike, let's move on to you. You're also in the sports world. Tell us about League One Volleyball.
Yeah, happy to be here. League One has a pretty unique model. We're trying to do something no one else has ever done in sports. We've started on the youth and grassroots level. So we now today own 80 volleyball clubs across the U.S. And just this past year, we started a women's indoor professional volleyball league with 6 teams around the country.
Awesome. Cristian, Van Tile, tell us a little bit about this company.
Van Tile Companies is a management company that operates a diversified fleet of businesses, most of them in either real estate or the automotive retail space. And we currently have 12 dealerships, which is what I'm closest to. And we are known for operating really excellent stores and providing great customer service.
And you focus on the South and the West of the U.S.?
That's right. Right now, we're focused entirely in 4 states: California, Colorado, Arizona, and Texas.
Great. Terezka, let's go back to you. You transitioned from tech defense at Viasat to sports law in MLB. What prompted you to make this transition to sports?
It was a simple job opening, nothing more than that.
What drew you to it?
It was something I started at Viasat and had an amazing experience there. They did me a solid and rotated me through like 6 different departments. So really got to know the ins and outs of the company. And so this, although an untraditional transition, ended up being seamless only because I dove right in and really got to understand the ins and outs of the entire company as a whole. And so then, of course, had to learn all the baseball stuff on top of it, but sort of from an operational standpoint, it's run just like any other company would be.
Was baseball a passion of yours? Is it something that you grew up around in your family, or is it something you really had to learn up on?
Definitely had to catch up on it.
And how did you do that? By going to a lot of games, just immersing yourself with the company, talking to people?
Yeah, I think everything, right? So jumping in, just like any new job, you just sort of immerse yourself and get your hands dirty and really learn the ins and outs of everything. And then just naturally the curiosity, right? How does this work? How does this operate? Our offices are actually at the ballpark, which makes it really easy to go talk to somebody and say, hey, walk me through your world. Show me how the production works. Show me how the Wi-Fi works. Show me how the security offices work, and sort of have them walk and talk around the ballpark so that you really understand their world. And so that when you're supporting them, you really know the context in which they're doing it. And then, yeah, going to games and learning all the rules and the nitty gritties, right? If a rule changes, you have to go and study the history of it. What changed? Why did it change? How is it going to be enforced, right? So learning the baseball rules in parallel as well.
You have to soak up a lot. I was looking at your LinkedIn site and your description of your job, and it is dizzying to read about all that you oversee. This includes matters related to baseball and players, of course, but also operations of the venue, front office, special events, corporate matters. You oversee legal issues around investigations to ticketing, social media, the full venue concerts. What area takes up the most time and mind share for you?
Depends on the time of year, right? Litigation, definitely completely unpredictable. So that's all year. In the off season, lots of construction happens, right? We have a very short window of time. You can't even really tell the contractor when they can start or not based on the postseason. So it's sometime in October, maybe in November, but then there's a hard deadline opening day. So that's a big crunch for construction. Leading up to opening day, it's getting all of your marketing agreements signed, sponsorship agreements signed, everything ready for opening day, right? People come and enjoy a game, but many don't realize what it takes to actually operate a venue for 40,000 people every single night, right? There's DJs involved, there's ticket reps, there's concession people, there's parking attendants, right? And getting all of those people onboarded and ready to go. Then once the season starts, it sort of levels out a little bit. You still go to the games and you're monitoring everything from a security perspective, medical, incident perspective. So your evenings are a little bit more hectic. Mm-hmm. And then in the down days, we've got all the private events and concerts. So it's a roller coaster.
And I imagine that at this time of year, your life must be very busy with the games going on. The Padres are having a solid season, currently second in the NL West.
Yeah.
Performance of the team and the buzz around it during a season, does that impact your job at all?
Absolutely. I think we're a very tight-knit organization that works hand in hand. So obviously we have an amazing product on the team, and I think that's the driver, right? At the end of the day, everyone wants to win. We're in the sport of winning a World Series, right? So you put an amazing team on the field, but then everything else has to fall in place behind it, right? People aren't just going to come because you've got great players. So making sure the food is amazing, making sure that the experience is great. So the marketing has to be something that people want to be. This is the place you want to be on a Friday night, right? There's so many other competing venues, entertainment spaces, but this is the place that we got to sort of create that feeling of missing out and not being here, right? So it's marketing, ticketing, social media events, everybody sort of works together to really make this a dynamic place.
Thanks, Terezka. Mike, I bet you can relate to a lot of what Terezka's talking about.
Yeah.
You've worked at some legendary companies in key roles, PepsiCo, you were CFO at Panera, CFO at Allbirds, and now you're at League One Volleyball. What drew you to youth sports?
Yeah, so different than Terezka to me. I'm a lifelong sports fan. You can tell from all the stuff in my office. Actually, some of my closest friends, I'm in a fantasy baseball league. They're all Padres fans. So maybe we can switch jobs or do like a Freaky Friday at some point.
I'm glad you didn't say a Dodgers fan or something. So
no, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. So I always had an interest in working in sports and never quite found the right role. And I got connected to Love through one of our investors, and I met our founders, and I was really blown away by the vision. They had this idea that you could really have like a huge impact in the world on the youth sports side, especially, and then be able to build that grassroots up to build the professional sports league. And with the growth in volleyball as a sport, starting on that grassroots level, that was really exciting and interesting to me. And it seems weird to make a transition from restaurants and retail to youth sports, but it still comes down to a lot of the same blocking and tackling, right? You've got to run the unit well. You've got to take care of your operators. You got to make their life easy. You got to be all over revenue, all over expenses, find future growth drivers. So it's not as dissimilar as it looks on the surface.
So League One, or Love, as you mentioned, that's what kind of it's known as in shorthand, it existed when you came, but it was still early on. At what phase did you arrive on scene here?
Yeah, I joined about 3 years in. So we hadn't launched the Pro League yet. When I joined, we had about 45 youth volleyball clubs. Now that number, we're going to end this year around 90. So we have 80 today. So the business has doubled just on the youth side, and we've launched the Pro League.
Amazing. And we actually have some videos showing us more about League One. Again, it's known as Love. So let's roll on that.
This has been 5 years in the making. This might be the biggest match in USA volleyball history with the best U.S. and players across the world.
The energy in this building, unreal. Are you kidding me? And Austin does it. Wins the first ever League One Volleyball Championship. What a season it has been.
I'm done. I bet you everyone now wants to watch one of these games. Now, LOVE, as it's known, is a community up model, and the company says that it is, quote, reimagining the future of volleyball. How is this model different from others which have come before, Mike?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that make it different. So the first thing is that there's not like a big brother league. So within the world of women's sports, even the amazing athletes in the WNBA, the NWSL, there's that feeling, right? That perception of the men's league that kind of like is over it, or sort of like is the thing people think about first. So in the world of volleyball, that's very different alone, right? Women's volleyball is generally considered to be a stronger sporting product, especially here in the US. So then that's the first part that's different. The second part then is there's been enormous growth in it on the youth level. Even within all the growth in youth sports that we're experiencing right now, volleyball has been the fastest growing sport at the youth level, girls volleyball especially. It's now the number 2 high school participation sport for girls. It's right behind track and field. It's the biggest team sport. I think we'll pass track and field this year. And that then has translated to the club side of the world as well. So that then has kind of helped us take advantage and build it grassroots up.
That's amazing. What is there anything specific that accounts for that growth?
I think it's a few things. I think volleyball is a naturally collaborative sport. If you think about it, on almost every single play, there's 3 touches that happen, and it's so fast paced. It also kind of fits like the attention span, I think, of a lot of teenagers right now. So I think those 2 things combined kind of make it unique. And then you saw that video. They're like total badasses. Like our pros are amazing. Like they are awesome. And when you see them in person, you get completely blown away. I'm fascinated by setters who kind of run the whole offense. They're like magicians when you watch it up close and personal. So I think that aspirational aspect of it as well.
Speaking of aspirational, I'm curious as to experience of how it has been to attract sponsors into this whole new model that you're building. And also having worked at Allbirds in one of those leadership roles, has that helped you kind of think like a sponsor, and that helped you attract those sponsors?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch the sponsorship piece because we don't have the advantage of the Padres and 3 million fans and national TV contracts and 81 nights a year of millions of viewers, I'm sure, yet. We'll get there at some point. So for us, a lot of the appeal of some of our sponsors is that tie of both pro and youth, and also the profile of the athletes themselves. So we just announced a couple of weeks ago a national partnership with Skims. So we couldn't have a more kind of like, on-trend brand to be our partner. And they love the fact that they're sponsoring on the pro league side. One of our star athletes, Madison Skinner, is a Skims athlete. And Madison graduated University of Texas last year. She's probably the most popular volleyball player of her generation right now, has a huge following, definitely driven by NIL. So that ties to it. But then Skims knows they get this immediate association and attachment to youth volleyball. And Kim Kardashian posted on her stories about the partnership. And she talked about one of her best friends is a volleyball mom. And we all were like, yep, there you go. That's the connection that kind of makes it so unique across the different parts of the business.
Amazing. When you get a free endorsement like that from Kim Kardashian, that's a great win there. Thank you so much, Mike. We'll come back to you in just a couple minutes. But first, Cristian, you have worked at Nissan and Volkswagen before moving on to Carvana, an online automotive retailer. Then you went deeper into tech by working for Vera Mobility, which develops smart transportation technology. And now you're working at Van Tuyl, which currently operates a dozen dealerships across the West and the South. Connect the dots for us a little bit. What prompted you to go back to the automotive world and move out of tech?
Automotive is a very exciting industry and business. It's very dynamic. Things are always changing. When I originally got into the car business, it was because I really liked the subject matter of cars, and was a bit of a gearhead. I was working at a law firm, and I had this opportunity to move to Nissan. But over time, I really fell in love with the way the business operated. It's hyper complex, very capital intensive, and it has multiple stakeholders between the manufacturers, the suppliers, the dealers, and it's been a pretty wild ride. But as you as you develop some expertise and understanding of how things work in that ecosystem, that seems to be where maybe I'm best placed. That being said, and a little bit building off of what Terezka said, a really great attorney is a bit of a Swiss Army knife, and the really good ones should be full spectrum attorneys and be able to slide into different roles pretty easily. So the move to the technology side really wasn't that tremendously different, because you were still dealing with litigation, contracts, et cetera, and then you have your own employment issues, et cetera. But so overall, it's been great to come back to the automotive side, because it is sort of my first love. But it's exciting to be a part of any great business.
I would imagine that at Carvana and Vera Mobility, you delved into a lot of IP issues, tech-related legal issues. What are some of the transferable skills and areas of expertise from those jobs that have been helpful in your current role? And what have been some learning curve areas?
Yeah, the technology at Carvana really was part and parcel of that organization. In the same way that Amazon is a technology company, Carvana was a technology first company. It was their platform, it was their website, it was the way they did things, it was the code that allowed all that to happen that really allows them to succeed in that space. What I gathered from that is really an understanding of how technology companies have to work and be a little more dynamic and different than a company that's a little bit more stable or maybe long-term focused, like a Volkswagen or a Nissan. It's sort of the difference between a giant super tanker and something like a relatively large yacht, I guess. I don't know, something like more maneuverable for sure.
And tell us about the scope of your job right now. What are some of the top legal issues you're working on, and what areas take up the most time and mind share?
It's pretty much everything that can come up, and it's not necessarily all related to automotive stuff, but for the most part, it has been. And so it could be anything from a customer complaining about their experience at the dealership. It could be some employment matters, but we're also doing some transactions, and the transactional work is pretty sophisticated. The days of small, relatively small, low value dealerships are just there anymore. And so as you go through the process of acquiring new dealerships or selling dealerships, it's a very expensive buy sell, something akin to pretty much any kind of merger and acquisition work. And so it's complex, and it takes a lot of time, effort, and detail.
You mentioned earlier about being a Swiss Army knife. How cross-functional is your job? I think you answered that in talking about being a Swiss Army knife. What other teams do you work with the most? And what are some things that you've done in your job that may surprise people?
You have to be extremely cross-functional, and to become a great in-house attorney, you have to fall in love with the business, and you have to get to know that business. And so it's important for you to know the numbers. It's important for you to be able to review the financial statements. It's important for you to look at the product line and to understand what drives the product line and what you're trying to do with your customers or to your marketing and so on. But I would say that the most surprising thing that I ever did in this role was I once went on a trip to a racetrack down in Austin called Circuit of the Americas, and they were filming a marketing piece, and they needed an extra driver. And I happened to have had at the time a race license with the SCCA, and so they actually had me drive in the event. So I was there to review the script and make sure we weren't doing anything really dangerous. And then they asked me.
That is an amazing story. Later on, I ask a surprising thing about you guys, but that's a wonderful story, and I'm sure that must have absolutely thrilled you that day.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Circuit of the Americas is a crazy track, that's for sure.
On that note, we're going to go back to Terezka and get kind of into the meat of things. The MLB has been impacted by the current administration's immigration policies. In June, the MLB Players Association recommended that players keep their immigration documents on them at all times. And the same month, the LA Padres said that they denied ICE officers use of their parking lot. Have the Padres been impacted by these policies? And what guidance are you giving your foreign-born players?
Yeah, so I think it's more fear than an actual impact, right? But many of our players do come from international, our Dominican facility. We've got 80 players down there, 2 teams. And so there's a decent amount of flow of them up to our minor leagues. And while the guidance was guidance, I don't think it's very wise to give 18-year-olds their visas and passports and tell them to carry them on themselves every day. So instead, I actually had them created sort of credentials. They almost look like employee credentials that we wear every day. They have them tucked in their wallet, and it basically just says, I'm legally here. I'm on a valid visa. I am an employee of the San Diego Padres, right? Because all of our players are our employees, and my number on the back, so that if they ever get caught somewhere. But definitely, right? We've got 160 players in our minor league system, 70 down in the DR. And so it does, the kids talk amongst themselves. So it is something that they're worried about. And so putting even in place sort of ICE protocols, what happens if there's an ICE raid, empowering the people at our different facilities, what questions can you ask, right? Because if there's guys that are armed and they're knocking on your door, most people don't know, and they freak out and they just open the door and let you in, which isn't a bad response. We can fix it on the back end, but just empowering them and letting them know kind of what the process is. What kind of questions can they ask? Can they ask for a search warrant? Can they ask for identification? Can they limit the scope of where they're allowed to enter them? Can they videotape them, right? Little things like this, that the more you talk about it, the more comfortable they get if they had to face a situation. Knock on wood, luckily we haven't, but I do feel that we're more prepared than we need to be at this point.
It also speaks to how broad your job has to be. Are you relying more heavily during these times on outside immigration attorneys?
Not necessarily. A lot of it is sort of, we'll gut check some things, or if it's highly technical, but a lot of it is sort of common sense or security practices, working hand in hand, even with like law enforcement, right? Obviously, we work well with them on securing the ballpark, game days, non-game days, all of our facilities. And so getting guidance from them and sort of asking them to help us help you kind of situation. And so that's where a lot of the advice also comes from.
What's one of the most complex or high stakes contracts you've negotiated? For example, a stadium naming rights agreement, player contract, or broadcast deal. Walk us through some of the biggest legal challenges.
You know, it's interesting sort of coming from a very different industry where there was a lot of satellite insurance, IP, international law, like those were very, very complex and billion-dollar deals. So nothing really compares in this new universe of mine. I would say one of the most complicated ones was actually the breakup of a contract, ironically. Everybody's probably heard of it, the breakup from Diamond Sports, right? Bally's used to be our media broadcaster. And one day, we all knew that they were in financial distress. They came and they said, we weren't going to pay your media rights fees, which in sports, that's a pretty sizable chunk of your revenue, right? So for them to say, we're not going to pay you, we said, okay, fine, but then you don't get access into the building. And so from one day to the next, we actually set up our own broadcast system and are now televising our own games in conjunction. Sort of we're on MLB TV. We're one of only 5 clubs now, but we were the first ones to sort of air our own games. And in parallel, sort of going through the whole divorce proceeding and the breakup and untangling the media rights and revenue and all that, which was also unprecedented because they were in bankruptcy. We weren't in bankruptcy, but sort of in parallel with bankruptcy, trying to make sure that we recouped at least some of the money that wasn't caught up in bankruptcy. So that was probably one of the messiest, most contentious, also public-facing deals that we sort of had to figure out what to do because it was unprecedented at that point.
And it sounds like it all happened in a really compressed period of time where you had to set up this virtually overnight studio.
We were contemplating things like many of these broadcasters, the ones sort of in the back of the trucks and actually like doing the broadcasting, the relaying of the signals, they're freelancers. And so we were contemplating sort of take off your Bally's t-shirt. Here's a Padres t-shirt, like come sit in the same chair. We'll pay you today, right? Checking the credentials, like you're printing lists of like security lists, like who is allowed to come into the building because yesterday they were a Bally's employee. Today they're a Padres employee. Like it really got, and it was overnight. It was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. And you probably didn't get much sleep in that overnight. So many pro sports teams are owned and run by billionaires. The Padres are family run. How is that better or different?
I would say they're still billionaires. I would say, it's fun because many of these families have made their money elsewhere. They're very successful entrepreneurs, business owners, what have you. And these are their pet projects. And so this is where their personalities really get to come out. And they all run them very differently. And they all choose to be involved in a very different way, right? Some are more on the philanthropic side of things. Some are more player heavy. And so you really do get to see this different side of them. But at the end of the day, right, it's their pet project. It's how they choose to invest and spend their money. And you get to be part of that fun project, bringing people a lot of fun at night.
Speaking of fun, Mike, youth sports is now a $40 billion industry, according to the New York Times. Youth volleyball is a big part of that. Any idea what the youth volleyball number is specifically? Do you have any numbers on how fast it's growing? You talked about the growth earlier.
Yeah, I mean, based on most of the data you have within the world of youth sports, it would tell you it's youth soccer, youth volleyball are the top two sports. The diamond sports, baseball, softball are up there, but there's just a physical space kind of perspective. There's only so many places they can practice, so many places they can do events. If you've ever gone to a volleyball tournament, one, I recommend earplugs because there's a lot of whistles, but two, you can put 100 courts in a convention center. So you can really have a lot of great use of space based on how the game is played.
Yeah, you're definitely, it sounds like you're in the hockey stick, not to build another sports analogy, but hockey stick area of, or phase of the cycle there. Private equity is now taking, attention. It's investing in youth sports, which has largely been up until now a mom and pop kind of business. Does that add new levels of pressure?
It can, for sure. I think our model on the youth side is a little bit different than others. A lot of these bigger firms that have come in and tried to invest in youth sports, they're even going wider. They're calling it youth enrichment. So basically anything that's not actually school, they're like trying to invest in across music, art, sports. We're very focused on one sport in volleyball and that youth to pro connection. I think that gives us an advantage then when we're talking to a club director who's thinking about selling their business and joining the Love community, because instead of it just being solely a financial transaction, what they're also thinking about is, are these people who love this sport? Are they people who are investing in the sport? Is there something for me or my staff or my coaches that's going to be a bit of a different experience? If it's solely a financial transaction, we can still do that. But when we find a lot of the people who want to be part of Love on the youth side, they want all that extra stuff that we bring to the table to try to make it a better experience for them.
I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about your experience before you joined Love. While you were at Panera Bread, you oversaw the company's $7.5 billion sale to JAB Holdings, which took it back to private ownership. At that time, it was one of the largest restaurant M&A deals in the U.S. What were some of the factors that influenced that decision? And can you walk us through the inception of the deal through execution and integration?
Yeah, as typically happens with this thing, you slowly build a relationship with someone, and then all of a sudden it's time, right? And I think that was the experience with JB. They got to know us very well. We got to know them fairly well along the way, just very casually, because they were investing in the restaurant space. So that was the first factor. It felt like a really good alignment of values and a really good alignment of needs. I think the second piece for us is we had just gone through an enormous investment and transformation phase, and almost all of that was working in Panera's business. So all the things that every restaurant has today, an app to order ahead, a loyalty program, delivery, catering, all that stuff, we were building it for the first time at a national scale. It was us and Starbucks were the two people building it. So I think we had just gotten through this like reinvention of the business. And that's always an interesting time to think about what is the future of the business and where does it go next. And then I think the third factor is forever Panera was a founder-led business. Ron Shaikh, the founder of Panera, and one of my mentors, Ron was ready to think about the next thing in his life. And that's something a board, it's just good governance, right? To think about what is the succession plan and how does a company do that? And I think it is easier to do that as a private company than as a public company. So that was a factor, in addition to the fact that you're right, it was the biggest U.S. restaurant deal ever. It was great value for our shareholders. It was the 35% premium. It was like all the stuff you put in the press release to also know you're being a good fiduciary to your shareholders.
Cristian, I want to go back to your past as well. In looking at the dates that you worked at Volkswagen, I see you were there during the so-called Dieselgate crisis. Before I ask you questions about that, though, we do have a video on the issue to show you first. Let's roll on it.
Once the world's top automaker, Volkswagen has fallen to number 2. One reason, the company admits it rigged 11 million vehicles worldwide to cheat on emissions tests. Here's a breakdown of the scandal, blow by blow. A group of scientists at West Virginia University discovered that Volkswagen was using software in its diesel cars to cheat on clean air tests. The software detects when a car is being tested. The engine then runs differently, making emissions seem cleaner than they ordinarily are. They find emissions are up to 40 times higher than legal limits, but the company repeatedly denies the claims to U.S. officials. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announces that Volkswagen was manipulating its diesel cars to score better on emissions tests. Volkswagen admits rigging 500,000 cars in the U.S. to work around emission laws, but the company's problems are bigger than that. It admits the problem is global in scale, affecting 11 million cars worldwide.
All right, Cristian, you were an assistant general counsel in sales and marketing at that time, so you were really in the thick of it. Can you bring us a little bit behind the scenes, explain some of the key takeaway lessons from that experience, and any recap that you want to give?
Sure. Well, first of all, this sizzle reel for me was a lot less fun than it was for Mike. But I would say that the issue that we had when the Dieselgate, as it's been called, although I don't like to use that term, but when that issue erupted, we were all taken aback. I still remember the day it happened. I remember literally finding out in the news that the EPA had issued this notice it was a notice of violation. That's what it was, and it immediately put us in a position that we were going to have to stop sale all the vehicles that were out there that had this issue, which these TDI vehicles were sold throughout the model line. When this happened, I went to my general counsel and I said, "Hey, I want to do as much as I can to try to help resolve this issue." And even though I wasn't a regulatory attorney or an attorney that dealt directly with the environmental aspects of our business, I did get to work with a cross-functional team, and that team was specifically put together to figure out how do we solve the problem, and how do we solve the problem as quickly as possible. What we wanted to avoid was a long and drug out news cycle that would go on for a year plus. Mm. The goal was to understand what the problem was, admit what was correct, what it is correct to admit to, which is that these things occurred, and then try to rectify that situation with regard to the various stakeholders, and that included government authorities, environmental regulators, and consumers, the consumers who actually had purchased these vehicles.
From the time, and it's mind-boggling to me that you learned about this from the news headlines, but from the time that you learned about this to the time that you had to stop the production, how long was that?
I mean, the stop sale was immediate. We had to issue that stop sale because we could not sell a non-conforming car, right? And we were effectively instructed that it was non-conforming on that day. It was a Friday, actually. And I will just, it seemed like the world erupted. And I'm not saying it was an overreaction, but within a week, we were being served over 300 lawsuits a day.
Wow. So you had your hands full and probably not getting any sleep whatsoever.
It was an experience that I'd never want to relive, but one that I wouldn't want to take away either, because it really helped me to mature and become like I said, a more of a full spectrum attorney, and one that can handle, some of the biggest issues. As I like to say, that unless you've got an oil well that's like spewing millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, I've seen a bigger problem.
Yes, definitely. It definitely grew a lot of work muscles there. Thank you so much for sharing that experience. Terezka, I want to quickly ask you before we close things out, that Padres have 5 women in senior leadership positions, including the second female COO in MLB history. Is the team a front runner in the league when it comes to women in leadership roles? And if so, what are some of the policies or cultural factors that influence that outcome?
I think the league overall and clubs subsequently as well are just looking at a diverse pool of applicants, which is really cool to see, to sort of bring in all those different perspectives into the front offices. So I think we're all trying to push for that direction.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll close things out with a fun round. We'll be right back.
Here we are again, at the beginning of everything. Hello, AI, blockchain, smart cities, the total transformation of how we live, work, and move. Yes, business is set to harness some extremely powerful ideas. And we say, let's do this. Now is the time to create the world we want. So, take charge of the change, and let's begin.
Hi, I'm Vanley Damone, founder, speaker, and author of the book, What If Pigs Can Fly? A practical guide to follow your curiosities to achieve impractical possibilities. My keynotes and programs are interactive, creative, and designed for participants to be active in their learning while connecting with the other people in the room. I have 3 customizable keynotes, stronger together by the sum of our differences. The future of leadership is creative, and What If Pigs Can Fly? Turn your curiosities into reality. To bring not just a talk, but an experience to your next event, learn more at People Talent Agency.
All right, we're going to go back to Vaughn for a viewer question. She taped a question for all of you to answer. Let's roll on that tape.
Hello, and thank you for taking my question. So my work is in bringing creativity and curiosity into the workplace as strategic tools. So my curiosity is, how have you been able to use your curiosity and your creative thinking in your careers, specifically to challenge the status quo and get people aligned with your vision, especially as you innovate the role of CFO?
All right, does anyone want to take a crack at that question on curiosity and creative thinking to challenge the status quo?
Yeah, I mean, I can take a crack at it, Aditi. I think a lot of times, like, curiosity is your best asset as a leader in any business, in any function. And I think a lot of that comes back to what Cristian was talking about. You have to have the passion for the business to want to keep asking questions and digging into it. But more importantly, when you're trying to solve a problem, it's really hard to solve it all the way up here. And sometimes the team doesn't have the perspective. But the more you dig in and ask them questions and understand the problem, the people closest to it are the ones who kind of understand it the best, and your curiosity meets their knowledge and you find a way to fix it. And there's, in a startup life, like my last 2 businesses, there's hundreds of things like that are totally broken until you get into it and understand it better with the team. So I think it's really one of the best gifts you can bring to your team is asking them good questions and letting them know it's safe. They're not like threatening questions. They're like, just tell me how this works. I want to help.
I love ending on that note of curiosity, but before we leave, one final question for you guys. What is something that would surprise people about you? Terezka, take a crack at that.
Czech was my first language. I didn't learn English until kindergarten.
Amazing. Mike, what about you?
When I took a sabbatical a couple summers ago, I took a few months of improv classes.
Who knew? And Cristian, tell us something that may surprise us.
I can do a really good impersonation of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay, do it right now.
No, I can't do it.
Okay. On that note, thanks to everyone for tuning in. To replay this show, just ask your smart speaker or car to play CFO Focus Live. We'll see you again next time.
Change is inevitable. But when it happens, you don't have to sit back and wait. You can take charge of it. With more than 60,000 powerful minds who live and breathe the nuances of a rapidly changing middle market. RSM instills confidence when it matters most by harnessing technology and deep industry experience, enabling you to take charge of change. RSM, experience the power of